on this computer. Okay, so resume share. So hopefully everybody can see my screen. Okay, so before we get going, I just want to tell you a little bit about me and what brought me to this work. My name's Alex Wilson. I'm a senior Tellington TTouch practitioner, and I qualified in 2014, although I'd had a real passion and interest in this work for many, many years before that. And 15 years ago, I had two new puppies, a Husky and a Dalmatian. Husky called Arapaho, a Dalmatian called Mischief, and I was having some issues with them. And I got a dog trainer, Marie Miller, to come and see me, who turned out to be a senior Tellington TTouch practitioner herself. And she showed me some of the TTouch method. And because of that, it really inspired me to carry on and learn more about TTouch and become a practitioner myself. So I started my training, and in 2014, I qualified as a level 1 practitioner. 2 years before that, I started Extra Dog Training. Extra Dog had been going for a few years as a pet products business. And then in 2014, I started, in 2012, I started the training side of the business. And then 2 years later, I qualified as a practitioner and incorporated TTouch heavily into what I was doing with dogs. I've been lucky enough to teach this work all over the UK and through the joys of Zoom during the pandemic and onwards. I've also been very lucky to have worked with students from as far afield as Australia, the United States, throughout Europe, Canada, and so on. So I'm really very lucky that I've met a lot of people and hopefully inspired a lot of people to go on their Tellington TTouch journey with me. And then in 2022, we were very lucky, and Linda Tellington Jones, the founder of TTouch, came over to the UK and gave a 2-day clinic. And at the end of that clinic, she gave me, I think one of my greatest honors to be promoted to a level 3 or senior practitioner by Linda. So that was really, really exciting. So what do we use Tellington TTouch for? Well, we're really using it to make changes to the animals. And TTouch, as you'll see later on, is not just about working with dogs. We can use it with so many different animals. We can use it to change behavior. We can use it to change the relationship. And a number of clients I've worked with who've had difficulties with their relationship with their dog, and incorporating TTouch, maybe just a little bit of body work, maybe just learning to communicate better with them through the observations, has made a big difference, to them. It can, in the sport dog world, it can really enhance performance. A lot of people who do agility use Tellington TTouch. I know of sled dog people, even at a very high level in places like Montana. I've come across sled dog people using TTouch. In the canicross world, really, if you're doing sport with your dog, TTouch can be really helpful, not just to help that dog to perform, but also teaching that dog to calm. And you'll see a picture in a few minutes of a dog called Tizzy, who I worked with years ago, who was an agility dog. And my job was to really help Tizzy to calm down after competing. It can also help dogs with their well-being. And trust, such an important issue. We always say, do we trust our dogs? But how often do we say to ourselves, does our dog trust us? And trust is a two-way street, and we need to have a two-way relationship with our dog. So what is the Tellington TTouch method? And I have to be honest with you, when I first came to TTouch, I found it really difficult to really get my head around this, because some people think of it as a training method. Some people think of it as a therapy. And really, if we had 10 other TTouch practitioners on the call and we went round and asked them, what is TTouch? We'd probably all give you different answers, because it really depends how you use TTouch. But the beauty of it is it can be incorporated into so many different elements of things that we do with our animals. For example, groomers use it, and I've been doing some work down at Plumpton College where they have the big grooming school and the vet nursing school, and they're going to be incorporating some TTouch within what they're doing at Plumpton College, which is really, really exciting. Vets, we have vets on the practitioner training course at the moment who are starting to incorporate TTouch within their vet practices. My own vet, the lovely Monica Kleistuber, who I've been working with for years, she's been on a couple of TTouch courses. And when I go and see her, and if I mention TTouch, she understands what it is we're doing and why we are doing it. Dog trainers use it. It's used in shelters and rescues. Physiotherapists use it. One of our instructors, Rachel Jackson, is a vet physio, and she incorporates TTouch into the work that she's doing. And really, if you work with animals, dogs, horses, little brown frogs, you can incorporate TTouch in what you're doing. But before we sort of start, what I'd like to do is show you a short video with Linda Tellington Jones, just telling you a little bit about the history of the work. So over to you, Linda.
So I want to tell you that, as I promised, about how this work developed as it was. And it all started actually on my 30th birthday. I saw an advertisement in the San Francisco Chronicle that for $5 you could get an astrological chart that was done by the first computer-generated astrological chart at Stanford University. And so I ordered it, and I still have this little book that it came tied with a yellow ribbon. And what it said is that in my lifetime, I would develop a form of communication that would spread around the world. And that in order to do so, I would have to learn to trust my intuition. And so I went to our library in our living room and pulled a book off the shelf and looked up in an index the definition for intuition, and it was unlearned knowledge. In other words, how I see it, it's actually the information that you just ask a question and listen to what the answer is. That's how I get them. You know, somebody says, "What are you doing there, Linda?" I don't know, but I just see what I say. And it's so interesting, all of the information that I have managed to bring through because I trusted what I said. And the first thing that, I thought when I got that, maybe it was talking about the videos, just teaching my work on videos. And so I did my first video in 1984, and well, it was interesting. But that certainly wasn't about videos. So actually, the way the body work started was that was like 1967, I think, that I got that message. And I always kept wondering, what is this form of communication really? And in 1960, wait a second, what year was that? I'm trying to think. This is really interesting. In 1960, I'd forgotten, this is before. This is so interesting because in this book that's being written about me, I started to bring all these pieces together. In 60, my grandfather came to us and visited our thoroughbred farm. And he said that he brought us a form of massage that he had learned from Russian gypsies when he was an American trainer racing and training horses in Russia. And so we started using this form of massage, these short little strokes all over the horse's body that he had learned from a Russian gypsy who was a groomer for him. And as a result of this 30 minutes of massage a day on his horses, in 1905, my grandfather bred field. So we started using this form of massage for our endurance horses, for our show horses, for eventing horses, and we did a lot of competing in those days. And we found that it really worked, actually, to help horses recover faster and be fit, but it didn't do anything for their personality. And in 1975, I started a 4-year study at the Humanistic Psychology Institute with Dr. Moshe Feldenkrais in San Francisco. And you know, I didn't think I needed it for myself. Of course not. I thought I was doing this for my riding students because the Feldenkrais work is known for improving athletic ability. And so I found in the second day of this training, when Moshe Feldenkrais made a statement that changed my life, actually, when he said, it's possible to learn in one experience moving the human body in very gentle, non-habitual movements that activate new neural pathways to the brain that enhance our ability to learn. Because Feldenkrais work is known for improving and enhancing movement, but Moshe Feldenkrais was passionate about learning and the human mind.
So that gives you a bit of an idea of how Linda started this work. And her sister, Robin Hood, who you'll see a video with a bit later on, did an enormous amount of incredible work to really develop TTouch into a method that could be taught and could be shared all over the world. So it's really fantastic, you know, of where Linda started. And Linda's still in her 80s and she's still teaching TTouch, which is amazing. Some of you may have been on the call with her, earlier in the week when she did a Facebook Live for us, but it's a fantastic that she's still teaching and still as passionate about the work as she was when she started. An amazing lady. If you ever get to meet Linda, it is such a worthwhile thing to do. She is absolutely incredible. So, is TTouch just for dogs? Well, I think Linda already answered that question because she said she started the work with horses. But I thought I'd just sort of show you some of the animals where we can use Tellington TTouch. Oops, not sure what happened there. Oh, I need to press the wrong button. So obviously we can use TTouch with dogs. Well, that's why you guys are here with me today. Cats, Tony Shelbourne, one of our instructors, does a lot of work with TTouch for cats. Horses, you know, TTouch started with horses and we have a whole modality focusing on TTouch for horses and other equines. Bunny rabbits, birds. When I was training, we worked with a lot of tropical animals to gain experience. And working with birds, with using feathers to do touches on birds, really interesting. Exotics. One of our colleagues, Nate Kant, who's a practitioner, he does a lot of work with exotics, and that's another really interesting area. Same with reptiles, snakes, rats, wildlife. I worked with a grey whale calf in the wild. Absolutely amazing. And I'll show you a picture in a second. Farm animals, really helpful. You know, it can be very stressful for the animals on a farm. And TTouch again can be really helpful to build calmness and help them to relax more. And of course, people, we have a whole new modality called TTouch for You, where we do the work with human beings. So this was a grey whale calf in the Sea of Cortez off the Mexican coast, where you're able to go out on the traditional panga boats, and the mothers bring the calves. The mothers bring the calves up to bring the calves up to the boat, and you're able to put your hands gently onto them. And whilst a lot of people were really trying to get selfies, for me it was about getting my hands on and doing a little bit of TTouch. A few years ago, I went to a cheetah sanctuary in South Africa, and I was invited to go into one of the enclosures with a couple of the long-term visitors and do a little bit of work with the cheetahs. And it was a really humbling experience, because you're looking at these big cats, and these are animals that, if they chose to, could actually kill you. Yet they were willing to allow me to come into their enclosure and do some gentle T-touch body work with them. When I was training, we worked with some exotics as well, and you can see this picture of me along with a couple of other practitioners in training as we work with a snake. So really, T-touch is a gentle method. It's respectful. The second T of T-touch, for those who don't know, stands for trust. So it is the trust touch that we do on our animals. And of course, it's really respectful. We want to have that mutual respect between us and the animal that we share our lives with. T-touch will have a positive effect on the animal's behavior. So important. And we can use it as a behavior modification tool. And, think of T-touch as non-invasive. It's not like taking the dog to the vet or the chiropractor or the physio, where things have to be done. The dog has a choice. We'll do some T-touch. If that's not okay for the dog, we'll give the dog a break. We'll do something different, maybe come back to it. It doesn't mean that T-touch isn't going to work for that dog. It just means at this moment in time, it isn't the right solution for the dog. And remember, when we're doing the body work, this is not massage. We are working with the nervous system. Linda always talks about it being a message, not a massage. So what is the T-touch method? And Lindy Decker, one of our instructors in South Africa, created this diagram, which really gives us a good overview of the different elements of T-touch. Yes, it's simplifying it to a degree, and there's a lot more within each element, but if you become a practitioner or train as a practitioner or even take a basic course, you're going to learn. But this gives, I think, a really good overview to the work. So starting at the bottom, it says philosophy of respect. And I think that's so important with T-touch. And we always say we do T-touch for our animals, not to our animals. Sorry, somebody just needs to be let in. Then starting going from sort of left to right, on the left we have observations, a key part of T-touch, learning to communicate with our dogs, understanding their body language. What are they saying to us? And then the feedback on the right side of this diagram. And as our instructor Tina Constance always talks about, what are the possible solutions? What are we learning from the animal by doing those observations? And what could we change? What could we do differently? What could we help that do? What could we do to help that dog to be more successful, should I say? How can we make things easier? Could we chunk an exercise down? Is what we're doing for the dog too difficult? And do we need to try and help that dog so that it doesn't become a stressful or scary experience for the dog? Then we have the body work, one of the key elements of T-touch. And a lot of people think that this work is just about the body work, but it really isn't. That is just one of the elements, a very important element, but one of the elements. And we have over 30 touches. They're all named after animals, which makes it easier for us to remember them. And we have different types of touches that I'll talk about in a minute. We have the approach and handling. T-touch is respectful. We don't need to get into an animal's face. Let's be respectful of how we approach the dog, how we handle that dog. And then we have the groundwork elements and the leading exercises, helping our dogs to walk without pulling on the lead, within their own balance. Also so important. And all this knits together with the specialist equipment that we use, all obviously positive, and all aim to help the dog to be the best version of themselves. So what are the benefits of the Tellington TTouch method? So first of all, we can use TTouch to reduce stress. It can improve the mental, physical, and emotional balance. And I think this is something we really need to think about, because the three types of balance are really, really important. And if we can change one, we can change them all. So if, for example, we've got a dog that's pulling on the lead, they're leaning forward, they're putting their weight on their front legs, what could we do to help that dog to be more balanced? Can we use a 2-point harness? Can we help them to be more relaxed and more balanced? And that will change, that may change their physical balance, but that in turn will change that mental and emotional balance as well. It can improve or change behavior. Really, really important. You know, there are so many times we need to change the behavior of our dogs. And TTouch is a really nice, non-invasive way that we can help change the behavior. Developing trust and understanding. I spoke a bit about this earlier. You know, we want to be able to trust our dogs, but we also need them to be able to trust us, particularly when you bring a new dog into your home, which I have done recently. 2 weeks ago, a beautiful young Dalmatian called Magic, who was 9 weeks old, came to live with me. And it's scary for her. She left a happy home with all her litter mates and her mother and her grandmother and her owners. And she's had learning to live with me, my housemate, and my elderly husky. And it's a big change for her. So we need to build that trust with her, and she needs to build that trust with us, to know that she's loved, to know that we're listening to her. And again, it will change the animals' expectations of us as people, but I've already covered that. And within a rescue situation, TTouch can be really helpful to help a dog to find not just a home, but a forever home. So who uses TTouch? And I've just got a few examples here of people I've worked with, that just to give you an example of some of the people who use this work. This is Terry. She's an American originally from California, and her husband live on the Algarve near Lisbon in Portugal. And Terry's been on a couple of TTouch workshops that I've taught over there, and it's made a big difference to her dogs. She's got two beautiful dogs, and TTouch has made an enormous difference for her. This is Sam Clark, the owner of Tizzy. And Tizzy, a few years ago, was a really successful agility dog. And Tizzy and Sam came to me because Tizzy didn't have an off switch. And we used TTouch to help Tizzy to be more relaxed and to help her be able to sort of come down after competing in agility. She certainly wasn't coming to me to learn agility. What I know about teaching agility, you could write on a postage stamp in large capital letters. But I was helpful to teach calmness for Dizzy, to teach her things that she could do when she finished competing, so that she could then relax, go to sleep, and chill out, rather than being keyed up all the time. This is Dr. Montana Mays. She is an Australian vet, and she was locuming in the UK a few years ago. And she came on one of my workshops, and she was absolutely bowled over by the work that we do in TTouch. And she was going to incorporate some of the elements in the rehab centre that she was opening when she went back to Australia, where she is now. So posture influences behavior. Let's just let that sink in for a minute. Change the posture, change the behavior of the dog. So one of the things we're really conscious of is doing those observations of the dog, looking at what we can see. And if the dog is out of balance, what could we do to help change them? There are things like Tellington TTouch body wraps. We're not going to be covering those on today's course, but if you continue with your TTouch journey, body wraps can be really important and really useful to help the dog to be more balanced. Using the 2-point harness that we'll be talking about later, another really important tool. So we really need to think about that link between posture and behavior. We want to help the dog using the bodywork to release tension, because a dog holding tension is not going to be a happy, relaxed dog. And using the bodywork, using some of the leading exercises can be really helpful to help to teach the dog to relax. Self-carriage, self-control, self-confidence are all linked. What I want to do now is show you another short video clip, and this you will see a dog coming out on a collar, and you'll see the dog pulling. You'll see how unbalanced the dog is. 2 minutes later, we put the dog on a 2-point harness, and I want you to have a look at the changes.
I'm a OG boy. Know that they ride or die.
Isn't that interesting? Just changing from the collar to the 2-point harness. And I think sometimes people forget the difference it can make having the dog on a harness, or what we call a balancing harness, compared to walking the dog on a collar. My new puppy Magic, and you'll meet Magic in the video towards the end. You know, she's never been walked on a collar, and we've started doing lead work with her on a 2-point harness, and she's really walking nicely, not even pulling at all on the lead, and I'm so thrilled about that. So let us move on now. I've given you a bit of an overview of TTouch, and now what I want to do is sort of delve into some elements of the observational part of TTouch. Observations is so important, because we can't change something if we don't listen to the dog. Dogs are communicating with us all the time on a minute-by-minute basis, a second-by-second basis, and a moment-by-moment basis. But we need to be listening to what the dog is actually saying. So trust in what you hear and see. There'll be a reason that the dog is doing what they're doing, but trust in what they're telling you. Notice how your dog smells. This can be really important, and it sounds like an odd one. But if your dog is doing something stressful, something that's maybe a bit too difficult for them, you might notice there's more of a sort of doggy smell, a bit of a smell of wee, all the things that you might just take for granted, but actually maybe the fact that there's some information there that you're not listening to. So really use your nose as well as using your eyes. Notice how the dog's breathing. Is the dog breathing light and shallow, or is the dog breathing deeply? Notice what you're doing with the dog if you see a change in the breathing of the dog. Again, this may be the dog giving you some information that's really relevant. Notice how the dog moves. Is the dog able to move slowly, or does the dog always move at 100 miles an hour? What is the dog doing when the dog moves very fast or very slow? Again, these are just observations, but we can learn so much by observing the dog. Look at the quality of the coat. I'll talk more about that later, but we can learn a lot by looking at the coat of the dog. Look for the small changes. Sometimes the big obvious things are not as important as the subtle things. The subtle things can give us so much information. Question everything, but don't question the dog. There will be a reason that the dog is doing what they're doing. So this diagram here just gives you a sort of overview of some of the things that we would be looking at when we're doing observations of our dog. So first of all, you know, I want to know a little bit about the dog. And one of the things, other than the obvious things like the name, the age, the sex of the dog, but I always like to ask the owner, and I ask, and it'd be great, you know, and good thing for you guys to think about is, Think of 5 things that you absolutely love about your dog and hold those in the back of your mind. Then think about the interaction of the dog. How does a dog interact? Do we notice any sort of signals that the dog gives? Do we notice them yawning a lot? Are they doing something challenging and we see them yawning? Do we see them sort of licking their lips? Do we notice them blinking or turning away or looking away or moving away? Do we see sort of excessive amounts about them sort of sniffing the ground? This could be because they're concerned. It could be a displacement behavior going on. How is the dog when they're being handled by you? When they're being handled by another member of your household? When they're being handled by a stranger? Do you notice any changes with the dog? Then start to think about the posture and start to think about the body language, because the secret language of dogs, or body language of dogs, can tell us so much about the dog. Look at the eyes. Are the eyes soft? Are the eyes hard? How relaxed is the dog? Is the dog showing a lot of white of the eye because the dog is sort of looking at one thing but focusing on something else? All these things give us a lot of information. Look at the tail. Look at the wag of the tail. Is the dog wagging more one side than the other? Could the dog be holding some tension at the base of their tail? Is it a very manic wag because the dog is worried? Is the tail tucked? There's so much information that we can learn by looking at the tail of the dog. The old adage that a dog with a wagging tail is a happy dog is not necessarily true. We do like to see the nice windmill tail, but we don't want to see a very stressed out, high intense wag. So look at what else is going on with the dog. There will, notice one thing and look for other things. Be a dog detective. How balanced is the dog? Look at the overall symmetry of the dog. Do we see the dog rolling over because things are just too much and they may not want their tummy tickled? It just may be too stressful. So again, that's something else to be aware of. And then look at the dog in movement. Can the dog move fast? Can the dog move slow? What situations are going on when the dog moves at different speeds? How is a dog when they're being walked by a stranger compared to their normal person? How is the dog off lead to on lead? How is the dog on a harness to being on a collar? All these things can give us so much information. And this is not a clinical assessment. This is observations. But then we want to think about observations, possible solutions. What are we seeing? What could we change? What could we do differently? And I do want to say it is possible solutions. We want to see what might be going on and what we could actually potentially change. The other elements of physical characteristics, think about the temperature of a dog. Just running the back of the hand over the dog and seeing if there are cooler or warmer areas where the dog might be holding some tension. And these might be areas we want to do some body work. Look at the overall muscle tension of the dog. Feel the paws. Are the paws cool? Are the paws warm? We say as human beings, if we're worried, we might have cold feet. If a dog is stressed, they may have cold paws. So all these things can give us so much information about the dog. And look at the overall coping strategies. Are we seeing the dog looking away, sitting away, hiding behind their person? All this gives us so much information about this amazing creature that we call dog, that we share our lives with. So think about some of the calming signals that dogs give. These are signals that dogs give to calm each other and even to calm us. And, have a look and see if the dog is presenting with any of these. Look at the physical characteristics of the dog. Look at the overall body posture that we've been talking about. Think about the interaction of a dog with another dog or a dog with a person. How balanced is the dog? How does the dog move? What are the dog's coping strategies? And try and observe without judgment. There will be a reason why dogs are doing what they're doing. We don't want to put our own human emotions, our own human ways of doing things with our dogs. Remember, these are dogs. These are not mini-me's. And there will be a reason that dogs are doing what they're doing. So let's talk a little bit about the coat. The skin is the biggest organ of the dog's body, and we can learn so much by looking at the coat of the dog. But the thing I would like to caveat with this is look for change. Just because a dog has got an unusual coat does not mean that there's anything wrong with that dog. It just may be that's who the dog is. But if we're suddenly noticing a big change in that dog, maybe we've got a black Labrador and we've suddenly noticed that there are areas where the coat is lighter or darker, drier or oilier. We might see some unusual swirls and curls. These are the things that I would be paying attention to. So the buzzword for this is change in the coat. Maybe we notice some bald patches, swirls and curls that I mentioned, areas that are slow to shed or that shed excessively, white tram lines in the dog's coat. All these things can be really, really important. And the other thing is maybe you've got a long-coated dog like I do with a Siberian Husky, and she has some strange coat anomalies. You take her to the groomer, comes back, all the anomalies are gone, but a week later they're coming back. That tells you something important. And I know with my dog does have some coat anomalies, and she has mild hip dysplasia. And one of the first things that I knew there was something wrong was when I noticed some change in behavior and changes in the coat. And I took her to a McTimoney chiropractor, who is my vet Monica, and she was diagnosed with mild hip dysplasia. So let's have a look at a couple of photographs of dogs. So this dog here, you can see on his back, the coat is just sticking up. On his shoulder, you can see a sort of darker patch, almost like a heart shape. There's a heart shape at the base of his tail and a sort of dark patch on his neck. These are just areas where the dog may be holding tension. Maybe there could even be some pain, who knows? But they're just things that I would observe. And if I was concerned the dog might be in pain, it's certainly not my place to be diagnosing, but it is a discussion that I'm going to be having with my vet. This dog here, another one really interesting. You can see 3 patches on his back where the coat is dry, and maybe the natural oils of the skin are not getting through. This dog here, you can see she's wearing a really tight collar, or he's wearing a really tight collar, I'm not quite sure which. But look around the collar and the coat is looking really dry. But maybe if that collar was taken off, the dog was put in a harness, after a few months, that coat might start to grow back to its natural color, and the natural oils of the skin may return. This is my dog Arapaho, and I haven't just put this in because I wanted to share my beautiful dog with you. But you can see here the white tram lines in her coat, and you can see the flattening at the base of the tail. So really, really interesting. And this picture was taken at a time where she lost interest in doing scootering with me. And this was where she was diagnosed as having mild hip dysplasia. But I mentioned at the beginning of this that we have to be looking at change, not just abnormalities in the coat. And this dog here is Key, who belongs to a friend of mine, Gail Skinner. And Key just has a really strange coat. And Gail brought Key on a TTouch course a few years ago that I taught. And I asked Gail, is there anything I need to know about Key because of his unusual coat? And she said, no, he's always had that. And she showed me a picture of him as a puppy. And you can see he's always had an unusual coat. So with observations, use your eyes. Look at the movement, the posture, the tension through the body, the coat, response to touch. And ask yourself, is the dog in an unfamiliar situation? Look at the physiological situations as well. Listen to the respiration rate of the dog. Listen to the heart rate of the dog. How dry or how wet is the mouth? Feel the extremities. We talked about cold paws earlier. Are there some warmer or cooler places on the dog's body? Look at the eyes as well. So much information we can get by looking at the eyes. And look at if there are areas where the dog has issue with touch. Do we see the dog doing excessive licking or chewing going on? Does the dog urinate or defecate excessively? Listen for vocalizations, and does the dog over vocalize? All these things can give us a good overall picture of the dog in front of us. And remember, work with the dog in front of you, because how the dog is today may not be the same as they were yesterday. And remember to use your hand, but I'll often start with the back of my hand in what we call the llama touch, because the back of a hand is less invasive than using the front of a hand, and it generally is cooler on the human being. So when we're doing observations, one of the things you're probably all thinking about watching this, particularly if you're new to TTouch, is, well, I'm not going to see a lot of these things. You know, you're pointing all these things out, but how do I see these things? Well, the joy of modern cell phones with their video cameras is that we can actually record our dogs and we can watch them back in slow motion. And I'm going to show you a video, and I'm going to show it to you twice. And it's not a very exciting video. It's a beautiful dog called Cooper, who belongs to Lindy Decker. And you're going to see Cooper walk up and down the staircase. The first time you're going to watch it in normal speed. And what I'd like you to do, if you've got a pen and paper handy, is as he goes up and down the staircase, write down things that you might be seeing that Cooper is presenting with. And then we're going to watch it again with a commentary in slow motion. And I wonder how many of those things you're actually going to have seen. Let's have a look. As I said, not a particularly exciting video, but now let's look at it in slow motion and let's see what we see. Hopefully you've written a few things down.
Slowing our video footage down gives us a much easier tool to view the movement of a dog in greater detail. It allows us to see things we may have missed at regular speed. For instance, with this dog, he lifts his left hind much more than he lifts his right, and if we look at his paw placement, his hind paws slightly overstep where the front paw was previously placed. His tail wags wide out to the right-hand side, but has very little swing out to the left. As he gets closer to the steps, the speed of his tail decreases. We then have an increase of speed again as he gets even closer, but then, when he comes to a complete standstill, his tail completely stops. While stationary, we can see he then looks around to his right side at his owner, which may be something to look for. Is this a side he always favours? As he is ready to climb the stairs, we see his tail increase in speed again, as if to propel him up the stairs. When climbing, he puts both of his front paws onto the steps, before he then brings up one of his hinds, and he does this on every step. Coming back down the steps, we can see the tail wagging much more evenly, And unlike before, the dog is stepping 1 foot on each step at a time, whereas before it was 3 steps and then ascending. Now the dog has reached the bottom, we can see that big, even swing in the tail. A nice blink of the eyes, and a nice yawn and release of tension.
So quite a lot of information when we watch the video in slow motion. Hopefully you guys picked up on some of the things and you wrote down some of the things that were in the commentary. So the next thing I want to talk about is, again, another tool that we can use for observing dogs, and this is free work. We're not going to do a deep dive into free work. If you do follow on courses in TTouch, you'll learn more about it. But I do want to just talk a little bit about using free work, but as a tool for observations. And again, I'm going to show you a short video. So within free work, we use a number of stations or elements. Generally, we put food on those stations and we just allow the dog to sniff, to eat, to do their own thing without any equipment on the dog, as long as it's safe to do it that way. So no collar, no lead, no harness. And we will reintroduce this equipment within free work, but to start with, we're just going to have the dog free. So really with free work, it helps us to sort of highlight, to look at the movement of the animal, movement patterns. We're going to look at the posture of the animal, how, does the dog have any concerns with what we're asking of them, and how willing is the dog to engage, how willing is the dog to disengage from their person and to engage with the elements. We're going to start with the dog free, and we may reintroduce some pieces of equipment so we can see how the dog responds if they've not had the collar on to when they've had the collar on. Is that harness comfortable for the dog, or does the dog behave differently when the harness is put back on? So all these things can be really, really useful. We'll use a variety of different elements. We'll incorporate different surfaces to give dogs different sensory experiences through their paws. So I'm going to show you a very short video just so you can see a dog going over some free work. Free work is a great add-on to the TTouch toolbox. I have found it a very useful tool to add to my existing toolbox when trying to build calmness with a dog. You will notice there's a number of elements here at different heights. We've got different surfaces. Some of them have food on, some of them have dry food, some of them have wet food. And we're going to bring a dog in. We're going to start off with no equipment on that dog. So we're going to even take the collar off, so no harness, no lead, no collar, and we're just going to allow them to explore. They can eat or not eat, the choice is totally theirs. It's not an agility course, there's no fault, there's no right, there's no wrong. If the dog wants to disengage, that's absolutely fine. And again, we can learn just by watching the dog. It's also a really good way to watch the body language of the dog, because unlike in a real life situation, there's nothing here that should influence the outcome of what we're seeing. So we can hopefully see some really interesting things that are going on. If a dog is in a higher state of arousal or very excited, it can also be a way of emptying their bucket and helping them to be more calm. I may also add a body wrap on if it's appropriate. We can progress the work and reintroduce various pieces of equipment, whether that be a collar, a harness. We may even add a long line or a sliding line to the dog.
We can also add Chirag Patel's counting game to free work. The counting game can be really helpful to start to build some engagement with the dog. We'll move around the elements, we'll add food and we'll count, hoping the dog will engage with us. This can be extremely useful for thinking about positions, and we can use it to help improve dogs' recall abilities and also for positions when it comes to loose lead walking.
So that just gives you a little bit of an overview to free work. There's a lot more to it than that, but at least that gives you a little bit of an idea and hopefully gives you a chance to sort of have a bit of a go with it, see how your dogs react. I've been doing some free work with my new puppy. It's just a really nice way to interact with her, to give her some choices and something a bit different from the traditional training methods. So we're going to move on now and talk a little bit about the bodywork aspect of TTouch. I'm going to show you a couple of touches so that you've got a couple of things you can take away with you. So when it comes to the bodywork aspect, remember I said at the beginning that this is a message, not a massage. So it's not deep tissue massage, it's light pressure touch. And we're just gently moving the skin, and we're not going deep in on the skin or the muscle or the tissue like we would in massage. We have over 30 different touches, and as I mentioned earlier, they are named after animals. And that's a really good way of remembering which touch is which. Don't worry at this stage if you can't remember all the different names. It's not terribly important unless you become a practitioner. What is more important is knowing how to do them and looking at those observations of the dog when you are doing them. And as I mentioned earlier, thinking about those possible solutions when you're doing those observations. We have different types of touches. We have circular touches, we have lifts, we have extremity touches, and we have sliding movements on the dog. As I said, it's light pressure touch, and we are working with the nervous system. We want to also use the touches to release tension from the animal's body. And in turn, this can really help to improve confidence for them and optimism with our dogs. So the 4 types of touches that I've already mentioned, we've got the circular touches where we move the skin a circle and a quarter. And to give you some examples, the clouded leopard, the llama, the raccoon touch, there's just 3 examples of circular touches. Then we have the slides and the zebra touch, and some of you who might have read some of the older books on TTouch may know it as the zigzag touch. Then we have the lifts, and a good example of that is the python lift, where we support the skin upwards, hold the skin, and then support the skin downwards. Great touch to do on legs, particularly if you've got a dog that doesn't use all its legs equally and you want to give them a little bit of more awareness through that leg. The python lift can be really, really useful. And then we have the extremity touches, like working on the ears, working on the paws, and so on. So Linda Tellington Jones always talks about the 9 elements of TTouch, and I'm not going to really do a deep dive on this training about it, but I'm just going to give you a sort of overview of the 9 elements. So this diagram gives you a good overview, and those who are mathematicians amongst us will know that the numbers don't add up, because we've actually got 10 on this diagram, because we've got an extra 1 added in there, the option for success, because we want to set our dogs up to succeed. And remember, we're doing TTouch for our dogs, not to our dogs. So the first thing we need to be thinking about is the circle. For the circular touch is the shape of the circle. Remember, we're moving the skin, and it's not an up-down motion, it's not a diamond, but we are actually moving in our skin in a circle and a quarter. We start at the lowest point and we lift the skin upwards in that circular movement. So if we imagine a clock, not a digital clock, but an old-fashioned sort of school clock, or the sort of clock you would see at an old railway station, and imagine that on the dog. I'm just going to turn off my share for a second. Just so you can see on my stuffed dog here. There we go. So if you imagine this clock here, this being 6, this being 12, this being 9, this being 3. So I'm just going to move the skin in a circle around back to the 6 and up to the 9. I'm not stroking the dog. I am actually just moving the skin. So what I want you to imagine is I'm taking an indelible marker, putting 4 dots on the side of my dog. And I'm not saying, please do not go and put marks on your dog. They won't like it. If you've got a Dalmatian, you might be able to do this with a Dalmatian because they've already got spots. And if you put a finger on each of those spots and make your circle and a quarter, where your fingers start and where your fingers end will be on those 4 dots. And just remember, you're moving the skin and you're moving in a circle and a quarter. Linda always talks about different arcs. So you've got an arc from 6 o'clock to the 9, from the 9 to the 12 to the 3, 3 to the 6, and 6 back to the 9. So we do our circle and a quarter, and then we pause, exhale. And then we can move the hand to the next position. So I'm just going to share my screen again so you can see the diagram. So we've talked a bit about the circle and a quarter, and it's really, really important that we are making a proper circle. The next thing we want to be thinking about is the pressure. It is light pressure touch. And if we took a scale of 1 through to 10, with maybe the sort of 7, 8, 9, and 10 being in the realms of massage, we're not going into those high numbers. We're really working on a pressure scale of maybe 1 to 3, possibly 4 if you had a really thick, deep-coated dog who really liked it a bit more intensively, but sort of really light pressure touch when we're doing our circle and a quarter. Tempo or speed, think in terms of a 1 second, 2 second, or 3 second touch. The faster you go, the more you will energize. The slower you go, the more you're going to calm the dog. But if you're working with a dog that maybe has just competed in agility, you want to be doing it a little bit faster because you want to meet the dog where they are. So start a little bit faster and try and slow those circles down. The mindful pause at the end of our circle and a quarter, or the end of our touch, just put in a little pause to allow the nervous system to be able to process that information. The connections, make sure we have a really good connection with the dog. We may want to slide from one position to another. We may want to just take the hand off and move from one position to another. But if we take the hand off, don't jerk the hand off the dog. Imagine you've got your fingers in a sponge and just sponge off the dog. And it won't feel so disorientating for the dog. It just feels really gentle if you just imagine your fingers in a sponge. Breathing, remember to breathe. If you're really concentrating on doing your circle and a quarter and you're holding your breath, you're going to be holding tension. That tension is going to go down your arm to the dog. So remember to breathe. intention. Have a positive have a positive outlook in your head of where you what you want, where you want your dog to be, changes you want to happen, but don't get hung up on outcome. A lot of magic, a lot of amazing things can happen on the journey. Body position. Think about, being respectful for the dog. We tend to work to the side of dogs. I'm not going to get work in my dog's face. Just try and be respectful on where you're working and work around the dog. Don't move the dog around, move around the dog instead. And feedback, we've already talked about. That's those observations and possible solutions. What do we see? How did the dog react? Do we carry on and do a little bit more, or do we stop? Or do we change the touch that we're doing? In TTouch, we often say less is more. We don't want to be doing great big long sessions. When I'm working with my dog, particularly with my puppy, I may only do a 2-minute session with the puppy. That's enough for her. With my older dog, maybe a 5-minute session, but I'm not going to be doing an hour's TTouch session. Just do little short sessions. And if you want to practice, cushions or stuffed dogs are really good for practicing. Practice on a partner, a friend, because they're going to give you really good feedback. So I'm going to show you a little video with Robin Hood just talking through doing the circular touch on her arm. It's really interesting, this video.
Touches are so light looking that it feels, or it seems like watching them, that it wouldn't be very significant in how they feel. So here are a few exercises that you might find really helpful. With just doing this on your own arm, you could experiment with noticing what's it like if I do this regular, what we call circle and a quarter. So wherever we place our fingers, we're going to be starting that circle. We're going to be starting it with a lift. So we think about calling it, if you imagine a clock on the wall, not a digital clock, that 6 is at the lowest point of gravity. So wherever you place your fingers would be 6 on the clock. And from that point, you're going to start moving the tissue in a circle and a quarter, approximately going from 6 around the clock, past 6 to 9 before you pause and then move to another place. Now here's some things to think about. If you stabilize your thumb and you place all 4 fingers on, and if you think about leading the circle or initiating the movement from the pad of your little finger, what that does is it helps to activate the joints in your other fingers, because our little finger is so much shorter, and that is what also really helps to keep your hands soft and keep the circle soft. Watching yourself in a mirror can be helpful because it's not uncommon at first for people to be quite rigid with their fingers. So notice what that feels like if you stiffen your fingers. What does that feel like? If you lift your thumb off, does that feel pokier? If you disengage your little finger, does that change how it feels? So you can also think about, what about if we went counterclockwise? So notice how that feels. Now there's times when you might use that, but being aware of what you are doing and what your preferences are can be really helpful. You might say, oh, well, why do we start at 6? So what happens if you were to imagine the 12 on the clock and you start at the 12? What happens is there tends to be kind of a dragging down. And I believe that it's actually that the coming down after the lift and the circle that has a huge impact on how the nervous system responds to it. Now, what else could we do? We could see what happens if you simply rub and do multiple circles. Just explore different things. You could even say, well, what happens if we go right up to our nail? So we might go, or to the tips of the fingers, and simply notice how that feels to you. You might notice what happens if you think, lots of the literature says lead with the middle finger, and notice what that does. You might find that easier, but you might find that you don't engage your little finger as easily. Be mindful of that your thumb is a little bit of a distance from your other fingers, and see how that feels. Notice if you go multiple circles, what does that feel like? So this is just a great exercise so that you get a sense of what your own pressure feels like and what you're doing, how it can really influence it by having certain changes that we do with our hands.
So I'd like to show you a video of some TTouch being done on a dog now, and got a nice little video now with Linda Tellington Jones working with her dog Griffin.
Ta-da! So this is a little video of me working on Griffin. And you want to put the sound on, or should I just talk over it? You can just start playing it. And he is a very incredibly intelligent, sensitive, very curious dog. And I keep like sitting back and letting him see, does he still want a little bit more? And it takes a little bit in the beginning to get your dog's trust so that you can work on the whole muzzle like that. And that trust is what we're looking for. That second T in TTouch stands for trust. I'm just using, as you see, the pads. That's called the Clouded Leopard Touch that I'm doing back there. And he's like not so sure still around. I can use the flat hand, or the cupped hand of abalone back around the hindquarters, but he's still a little bit uncertain because he had an injury to his back leg when we got him over a year ago. These are little tiny touches and slides very gently. I just want to see, are you okay with this? You want to keep going? He said, yep, keep going. And we really want the feedback of our dogs. And in the beginning, it's you, he says, I'm not sure back there.
So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to show you a couple of touches. I'm going to show, I've got to put together a couple of videos. I'm going to first of all show you the zebra touch, which can be really, really useful. Oops, what happened? Go.
The Zebra Touch is a really handy Tellington TTouch. It's not one of the traditional circular touches, and we use it to help the dog to get a bit more awareness of their body. Maybe we could describe it as the dog knowing where its body begins and ends and where the real world begins and ends. It's a connective touch and one of the family of slide touches. So I'm going to work down the dog's body from their shoulder to the base of their tail. Maybe I'll just put one hand inside the harness, and I'll start with my fingers together in a sort of claw shape. And as I come down the dog's body, I'll open, come up and close, down to open, up to close, and so on. I can also do it with the flat of my hand. For some dogs, using the tips of the fingers can be a bit intense. So using the flat of the hand, I'll start again with the fingers on the dog, and as my hand comes down, I open, close, open, close, and so on. I can work over the dog's back, so I can go one side, then the other. And really how I do the zebra touch will all depend on what is appropriate for the dog at that moment in time. If I'm walking the dog on the lead, and the dog might be just getting a little bit antsy on the lead, I might just stop, do a little bit of zebra touch, and then we'll just walk on. The zebra touch is not just a touch we may use for calming. We can also use it to stimulate the dog. So for example, we might be getting a dog ready to compete in a sled dog rally, and we want to stimulate their nervous system. So just doing the touches really fast over the dog can actually stimulate their nervous system. We can also work over the dog's chest, and we can do some zebra touches on their chest as well. We don't have to do it over their back. And that is the zebra touch. If you have any of the older books on TTouch, you may have seen reference to the zigzag touch. The zigzag touch is exactly the same. It was just renamed to the zebra touch because it was one of the only touches that wasn't named after an animal.
So I want to now show you the clouded leopard touch, which is one of the circular touches.
Let's look at the clouded leopard touch. This is one of the most popular of the circular touches, and for many people this will be the touch that they will be familiar with. Of course, it's not the only circular touch, and in fact there are lots of other ones that may be even more useful. For clouded leopard touch, we use the pads of our fingers. The thumb we rest on the animal as an anchor, and we use the pads of our fingers. When we are creating the touch, we need to think about that clock on the wall, and we're starting at the lowest position from where we are, and we'll think of that as the 6 o'clock position. We are going to move the skin from the 6 o'clock position in a circle up to the 12 o'clock. Come back down to the 6 o'clock, and then move through and pause when we reach the 9. If we want to then move to do another one, we'll just relax the hand, just slide to the next position, and we'll do it again. Let's have a look on this stuffed dog. So my thumb is going to be the anchor. It's really important that I will use the thumb as the anchor, because if I try and do it with the fingers without anchoring my thumb, I'm not going to be able to do a nice calm circle. I want to lead with the little finger, because if I lead with the little finger, the other fingers are going to follow. If I lead with a middle finger, it's very easy for the little finger or the next door finger to lift. So let's lead with the little finger. Remember the clock on the wall, and I'm starting at that 6 o'clock position. I'm lifting the skin in a circle up to 12, back down to 6, and finish up on 9. Remember, exhale and put in that pause. The quality of the circle is really, really important. And we remember, we're not stroking the skin, we are actually moving the skin. So if you imagine I was to take a felt tip pen and put 4 dots onto my dog and put one finger over each dot, As I move the skin around, my fingers will stay on the dots without moving. It's the skin that's moving, not my fingers. I can also steady the dog by putting maybe a hand through the harness. If I've got a lead on the dog, I could be holding the lead. Obviously, if the dog is uncomfortable and needs to move away, we're going to let the dog do that. That is the clouded leopard touch. Let's have a look at Tina demonstrating on a live dog.
So that moves us on to the last area of TTouch that I really want to talk about today, and that is the leading exercises of TTouch. So before we sort of come on to talking about the leading exercises, let's just spend a quick minute just talking or thinking about why dogs pull on the lead. Because for so many owners, you know, having their dog pulling is a major issue for them. And the reality is we've done a great job of teaching our dogs to pull on the lead. They don't come out the womb pulling. And if our dog does pull, we need to understand why they pull and come up and look at some solutions of helping that dog to be more balanced on the lead. As I said, you know, some dogs have been taught, dogs have been taught to pull, maybe by the equipment that we use, the training techniques that we've used. But, you know, it is what it is. But there are things we can do to change that situation. The dog is out of balance. In the first part of this training, we talked about that mental, physical, and emotional balance. And we want our dogs to be balanced. And that's why we use these 2-point harnesses, to help our dogs to be more balanced on the lead. Maybe the dog is being walked on equipment that is either inappropriate or may even encourage the dog to pull. And this isn't always the owner's fault. They may just have been told that this will make a big difference, but really it isn't the right thing and isn't the right thing for that dog. So just think about what we're using. You know, a collar and lead. I know people will tell you that a flat collar is the best solution and dogs should be able to walk on a collar. But what if that dog lunges? What if something spooks that dog? You're going to be putting pressure on the neck. And I'm not saying don't put a collar on a dog. I love collars on dogs, and both my dogs wear very pretty collars, but they don't get their lead attached to those collars. Their lead is attached to a harness. Because if I'm out with my dog and something spooks them, I don't want something pulling on their neck. Slip leads or choke chains, they do one and the same really. And again, it puts pressure on the neck. It can easily encourage the dog to pull. It can put the dog into what we call that opposition reflex. You pull, I pull. Choke chains, as I say, they work in a very similar way. Pinch collars, well, I don't think I really need to say anything more about them, but why would we want barbs going into our best friend? And electric shock collars, absolutely terrifying. I've worked with dogs that have been the victim of electric shock collars, and those poor dogs are scared of their own shadow, and it doesn't stop them from pulling on the lead. So like we said earlier, there's this enormous link between posture and behavior. So what could we do to change the posture of the dog? That's right, let's use a harness. But let's also make sure we're using the right kind of harness. There are different harnesses for different jobs. Some of you are probably thinking, well, why would I put a harness on my dog? Because a sled dog wears a harness, and I want a sled dog to pull. Yes, of course. But a sled dog harness looks very different from what we call a balancing harness that we use in TTouch. We want a harness with two connection points, a connection at the front and a connection at the back, so we can combine a double-ended lead with that dog. This can also help with reducing reactivity. It can help the dog to gain confidence. And it can even help the dog to feel safe. But most importantly, it will change the balance and the posture of that dog. I want to start off showing you a little video that I made last week when I first introduced Magic, my amazing new Dalmatian, to a harness. She'd never had a harness on. She'd never been walked on the lead before because she'd come to me from her breeder. Well, my breeder had not actually started any lead work with the pups. And this was our first experience with the harness. We didn't go out for a walk. We just literally put the harness on and took it off again. But we introduced it with a body wrap. Let's have a look at how Magic got on.
So I'm going to introduce Magic to wearing a harness. She's never worn a harness before, and she's only 8 weeks old, so we don't want to make this a scary experience. Going to start off using a body wrap, just putting a quarter wrap onto Magic really loosely, and I'm going to just literally tie it off as so. Come on, you're a good girl. And we want her to know that good things happen when she's got her body wrap on, and also good things will happen when she's got her harness on as well. So we've got the body wrap on Magic, just going to let Magic move a little bit. Whilst I wouldn't generally use food as a lure with a body wrap, I just want to get Magic moving so she gets that sensory experience around her body where the harness is going to go. If this was too challenging for the puppy, I might break this into a few sessions, but as you can see, Magic is really coping nicely with this. So I'm going to take the TTouch harness. I'm going to sort of try and size it up before I put it on Magic. I'm not going to take the body wrap off initially, and I'm just going to start off and I'm going to pop it around her neck. And again, going to give her some food. I'm using high value food. I'm using some ham here. Magic. Because I want her to know that good things happen when we have our harness on. And she seems to be pretty comfortable with this. So I'm going to move it one stage further. And I'm going to take the straps and going to do up the straps around Magic. It just will feel different. She's never had a harness on before. I'm not doing it up tightly at this stage. And again, going to bring her friend the ham into play, because I want Magic to see that good things happen when we have our harness on. Magic, look, good girl. It's a clever girl. I'm not worried at this stage that the harness is on a bit too loose, because I don't want her to feel that it's got to be too scary an experience. We're probably not going to go for a walk at this stage with the harness on, because she hasn't experienced a harness. All I'm trying to do is to get her to experience a harness. I'm now going to take the harness off, and I'm going to take the body wrap off, because she's had it on, she's had that sensory experience around her body, and we don't want it to become a toy, so I'm just going to try just distract her a little bit with some food. Magic, 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 look, look. Come on, Magic. Magic. And I would probably end that session there. We've achieved a lot. We've got a body wrap on her. We've put the harness on her. We've had her doing a little bit of movement with the harness, but but I think this is a good place to end this session. And then tomorrow, maybe we'll progress this to connecting a lead and maybe starting a little bit of loose lead walking. Well done, Magic.
So the next day we took this one stage further, and you will see in this video where we walked Magic with her harness on. We didn't go out, we just walked her in the garden. Again, I didn't want to make it scary for her. And in further sessions that we haven't filmed, we went out into the field next to the house, and we've now started walking down the street a little bit so she can start to hear car noises and things. But let's have a look at the second session.
So today I want to progress with what we were doing last time with Magic, and to put a harness back on again, and to add a lead, and to try a bit of loose lead walking. It will be the first time she's walked on a lead, and it could well be a work in progress. So I'm just going to get her harness, the same harness we used last time. So I'm just going to pop her harness over her head. And she's very excited by the treat bag, so we'll just give her a little bit of ham. We want her to know that good things sort of happen when she has her harness on. We don't want it to be challenging for her. We don't want it to be a bad experience. We want her to build a positive experience with having the harness on. So I should give her a little bit more a bit more food there, just so she doesn't sort of think that this is anything nasty or scary. I'm gonna give her another bit of food. Just going to now check that the harness is fitted comfortably. I don't want it too tight, but I don't want it too loose. So I'm going to put one of the clips on the harness. I'm going to take the clip off, and I'm going to put it back on again. I want her to hear the sound of the clip, and I want to reward her with some food. I'm now going to also put the front connection on the harness, and again she probably will find this a little bit challenging. And now we've got her connected on the lead. We're going to start doing a little bit of walking with her, and whilst I wouldn't normally use food for loose lead walking, because this is her first time, I am going to just have a little bit of food just to help her move on the lead. Come on, Magic, let's go. I don't want to have a tight lead. I don't want her to start to learn what a tight lead is, so I will just let the lead go slack if she pulls against me. Magic. And I'm just going to lure her a little bit and then give her a bit more food. Again, I'm going to lure her a little bit and give her a little bit more food. And I'm not worried that she's sort of looking at me and looking at my treat bag. Magic. Come on, you missed that piece. Look, there's a bit down there. And always be careful that the pup hasn't got their paws caught in the lead. Good girl. Come on. Good girl. Shall we go back a little bit the other way? Clever girl. And she's learning that good things happen when she walks on the lead. The harness is a little bit big for her, and she will grow into it quite quickly. Again, she's got herself a little bit tangled, so, and a little bit more food. Come on, Magic. You're doing very well, Magic. You're very clever. You're very clever girl. Who's a good girl? Being really conscious not to pull on the lead, because I just want her to find it easy, and we want to try and keep that loose lead right from the get-go, because we don't want her to start learning to pull on the lead, because that's where we're then going to have to do a lot of work later on. But if she can learn that a loose lead is okay, we're going to have success with loose lead walking. So we'll just do one more little go and a little bit more reward. We will start to fade out food, but because this is the first time she's ever walked on a loose lead, I'm not too worried about the food, but we don't want long term for her always to be relying on food when we're doing loose lead walking.
So isn't Magic gorgeous? She's very loved and she's a wonderful new addition to my life. But it's really interesting just seeing how, we started with a very young dog and how we progressed. So the next dog I want to sort of show you is an adult dog. I was in South Africa last year doing some filming with Nikki Luca, who's a brilliant trainer over there. And my cameraman, who's a good friend of mine, was having some issues with his dog who pulls on the lead and doesn't really go on a lead. And so I did a couple of sessions with Francis's dog, and we just let the cameras sort of roll. We weren't formally filming it, but here's what happened. And you'll see me using the 2-point harness here. And the 2 sessions, we had some quite nice results.
Today we're going to be working with Bingo. Bingo is 18 months old. He is a Jack Russell crossed with a Beagle. He hasn't had much experience walking on the lead. His owner Francis does take him out sometimes on a collar or on a harness, but they haven't done any proper loose lead walking. This will be a work in progress. We may not get a perfect result, but I'm at least going to show you how we use the Tellington TTouch leading exercises to help Bingo to learn to walk on the lead and to hopefully walk in his own balance. What do I mean by in his own balance? Well, the short answer is posture influences behavior. So if we can change the posture of the dog, we'll change the behavior of the dog. Remember, physical balance influences mental and emotional balance. So within TTouch, we're always very conscious of the animal being in as perfect balance as possible. To do this, we're going to use 2 pieces of equipment to help Bingo. First of all, we're going to use a Tellington TTouch harness. So we're now going to just introduce Bingo to a harness. And he's not really used to wearing harnesses, so I'm just going to give him a little bit of ham, pop a bit of ham, and I'm just going to pop the harness over his neck, and I want him to know that good things happen when we put the harness on. So there's a little bit of ham. He's a good boy. Yes, that's so good. And I'm going to just do up one more clip. And the sound of the clip doing up gets paired with a piece of ham. And the same with the other clip. And again, I'm just going to pair that with a little piece of ham, because good things happen when we have our harness on. So I'll check that it's done up correctly. I did set this already before we filmed, but it's sort of, the front ring is sitting on his sternum bone and the back ring is just behind his front legs without it cutting into him. The other piece of equipment we're going to use is a harmony leash, and this is a double-ended lead. It's adjustable and it also has a sliding handle. When we use the harmony leash, we don't put our hand...
Oh, sorry, I pressed the wrong button.
Today we're now going to just introduce over his neck and the other clip. before we filmed. And this is a double-ended lead. It's adjustable and it also has a sliding handle. When we use the Harmony leash, we don't put our hand through the lead, we actually just put our fingers through like this. The reason we don't put our hand through is if the dog should pull or jerk, we could end up with a sprained wrist. And even though this leash is, the handle of this leash is padded, it's still not a great plan. So always just hold the lead through your fingers like so. Then in an emergency situation, and of course as long as it's safe for the dog, we can just open our fingers and drop the lead. One other thing I want to talk about is when we're working with Bingo, we're not going to get behind the dog. When we end up getting behind the dog, we end up in what we might call a water skier's position and end up behind the dog. The dog is going to pull forward rather than the dog being balanced. We want to be up a side of the dog, or ideally in the dog's peripheral vision. If the dog should pull, all we're going to do is just take a little bit of tension on that lead. We're not going to pull against it. We're going to bring our hand forward and we're going to release, hopefully achieving a loose lead. This may not work perfectly the first time. It may take a bit of practice, but with a bit of practice, if we can start thinking about walking our dog in the peripheral vision, hopefully that dog will work with us without pulling on the lead. So let's have a look and see how Bingo goes with the Harmony leash and the Tellington TTouch harness. We have to remember this could be a work in progress. It's the first time he's used equipment like this. Let's have a look. Shall we go for a walk, Bingo? So I'm just looking where I'm going. If he pulls, I'm just going to bring the hand forward, step forward, aiming to get into his peripheral vision. Let's go, Bingo. Keeping myself nice and relaxed. Bringing that hand forward. Want to step into that peripheral vision. So we got a nice loose lead. I've got behind him into the water ski position, so I'll just hold that tension. I'm just going to step forward, bring my hand forward, and now the lead is starting to go slack. Bingo, let's go. Good dog. Good dog. Again, I'm just stepping forward, bringing my hand forward. If we want to change direction, and Bingo might have other ideas, and I've now got myself behind him, he actually wants to go in that direction, I want to go in that direction. If I pull against him, we're going to go into what's known as opposition reflex. So what I can do is just relax and let the lead go slack, and I can then look where I want to go and just walk in that direction. I can even point with my finger so that he knows where I want to go. Just a little lift and hand forward, just slowing him down and bringing my hand forward. Slowing him down, bringing my hand forward. And this is going to make walks so much more pleasant for Bingo and so much more pleasant for Francis. And also in due course with these techniques, Francis's two young sons may also be able to walk Bingo on the lead. And this is going to be a win-win for everybody. A great opportunity for Bingo and a wonderful experience for Francis and his family.
So that sort of wraps up what I'm going to be teaching today. This is not the full TTouch package by any stretch. But hopefully this gives you an overview. It whets your appetite and Those of you who may have been on courses before, it's been a little refresher. So if you'd like to learn more about TTouch, first of all, we have a little gift for everybody. We have created an ebook all about TTouch, and the link is on your screen now, xdog.me/TTouch-ebook. And please download that for free, and it will cover some of the things that we've been talking about this afternoon. If you'd like to continue on further, we do have a couple of really nice online courses. And for those of you who have attended this masterclass, should I say, what we have done is we put a couple of sort of exclusive packages together to really get you started in learning about TTouch. So the first course that we have is what we call our Introduction to Tellington TTouch. It's a self-paced online course. Use no rush on how long you can spend doing it. You keep the materials for life. You can do it multiple times. I'll be your guide and your host as I take you through 14 easy to follow lessons. We have a little quiz at the end of each lesson to make sure that you've taken on board what we've taught, and we've got a couple of bonuses. We have a video with Linda Tellington Jones on the 9 elements, and a couple of ebooks that you can download, one on stopping dogs pulling on the lead, and our 90-page student manual. And you might recognize the dog on the cover of the student manual because it's Bingo. What we're doing for you guys is we're also throwing in a few extra bonuses. In fact, we're throwing in about £400 worth of bonuses of a few extra short courses. In fact, there are Facebook Lives that we've had professionally edited. One looking at the importance of intent with TTouch, we've got one on puppies, one on reactivity, and one on calmness, and we add everything up together. The value of this package is £695 or $883. But because you have not just filled in the form but actually turned up to watch today, we're actually going to offer this package for you for just £74.99, or the US equivalent of $95 US. If the observations part of the course was of a lot of interest to you, we have also just launched a new course called Talk Dog, which looks at observations. It looks at canine body language, dog emotions, and dog-dog interactions. We've got 39 lessons in this with quizzes, and it's taught by me and by Nate Kant, and we put this course together between us, and it really does give you a deep dive into canine body language, and both Nate and I are also canine body language instructors. And we also have a 90-page student manual that's just with the designer at the moment and will be available very shortly. Both courses also have a Facebook group, so that if you do have questions as you go through the course, just tag me in those questions and I can answer them in the Facebook group. Plus, again, we've got some more bonuses that we're throwing in because you are here on this training. We've got a short course on calming signals. Tina Constance's mini course on observations and possible solutions. A mini course on dogs with anxiety with Tony Shelbourne, and Lindy Decker's free work and groundwork mini course. All these really, really interesting. And the cost of this would be £470 or $600. But as you're on this training, again, we're going to just do this for the small fee of £74.99 or $95 US dollars. So this offer expires on February the 4th. If you would like to take advantage of these two opportunities, then if you just go to the link on your screen, which is xdog.me/masterclass portal. That's xdog.me/masterclass portal. Also, if you are interested in starting your Tellington TTouch journey, we are offering a practitioner training that is being run by Tellington TTouch Canada with Robin Hood. And if you enroll before the 4th of February, we can offer new enrollments at 20% discount. And again, it's the same link, xdog.me/masterclass portal. Well, that's really everything I've got. I hope we'll see some of you on the online courses, because we've shared a lot of information over a short period of time, and there's a lot more still that I'd love to teach you. So just go to xdog.me/masterclass-portal, and you can have a look at some of the courses that we are offering. And that sort of takes us through to question time. If anybody's got any questions, those of you who are on Facebook, if you pop your questions in the chat. Those of you who are in the Zoom room with me, again, if you put your questions on the Zoom chat, and I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and I would be delighted to answer some questions. Okay, so Jane, if you could send over on Chanty any questions from the Facebook group. I'm just going to have a look. I'll probably start at the bottom. Hey, I'm going to start with Michaela. Would love to learn, what is your preferred touches for puppies, and what time of day would you use it? Really good question. With a new puppy, I would tend, it is a little bit of trial and error, because I want to see what that puppy's going to like. With my elderly dog, Arapaho, who's a Siberian Husky, my go-to with her is the Tiger Touch, which is where I'm using my fingers open, because I can really get into the coat. With Magic, I'm still sort of experimenting a little bit. She loves the Llama Touch with the back of the fingers. She also loves the Abalone Touch, which is with the flat of the hand on her chest. And I usually do 2 or 3 touches, look at her body language, do some observations, see what she likes, maybe try a couple of others, maybe stop. I'll really listen to what she's saying to me. I hope that answers your question. Julia, you would like the link. Bear with me a second. I just need to pull it up again. I'll put it in the Zoom chat. Where is it? PowerPoint. So for anybody who would like those who would like the link, there's the link now in the Zoom chat. We can't give a CPD certificate. This isn't for today. This isn't a CPD accredited course, I'm afraid. This is just a course to gain people's knowledge. So I haven't got CPD certificates for this training. So I'm sorry about that, Karen. Alison, with separation anxiety, again, just see what touches might help your dog. Body wraps might be something you want to explore get further, which we haven't really had time to cover today, other than the little video with magic. But body wraps might be helpful to to help a dog with separation anxiety. But it's a really big subject. I'm hoping we're going to have a Facebook Live later in the year dealing with separation anxiety, but it is something you might want to work one-to-one with a TTouch practitioner or a behaviorist who can help you. Katia, I'm sort of going from a bottom and working up because it's really difficult to keep track of all these questions, but you said sometimes it's not the right time for TTouch for an animal. How long would we try when the dog says no? My cat loves it as another dog that I make regularly, but it's been a couple of years. To be honest, Katia, if the dog says no, the dog says no, and I'm just going to stop. I might try a different touch, but TTouch really is a permission-based training. I'm not going to just keep trying until the dog accepts it. Say I'm doing some clouded leopard on a dog, the dog's giving me body language saying they're not okay with it, they're not comfortable with it, I'll just stop. Maybe I'll try a bit of zebra touch. But if it's not the right time for a session, that's okay. Let's do something else. Let's give the dog a licky mat or do something that the dog finds fun. But it doesn't mean that the dog doesn't like TTouch. It just means at this moment in time, it's probably just not the right solution. You want the link for the book as well. Bear with me. Just need to scroll back in the presentation. Oh, there we go. I'll just pop that in the Zoom as well. Jane, perhaps you could put those links in the chat on the Facebook page as well. That would be really great. Okay, so let's have a look. Which touch would you so this is Dorka, which touch would you recommend to start with a very busy, fast dog struggling to slow down their mind and body? Well, one of the touches I would use would be the Springbok touch. With the Springbok touch, I'm just doing little jumps around the dog, almost like just putting my fingers through the coat and just lifting. I do it very randomly around the dog's body, but the Springbok touch would be one that I might start with. Also, the zebra touch might be really useful as well. Gosh, there are so many questions coming in. Let me try and go back let me just try and go back and that's been answered by Jane. Great. Maria says you want to be a practitioner. Well, there's a link there. There is a course starting next month, the immersion course with Robin Hood and the other instructors. I do recommend looking at that course. It's going to be absolutely phenomenal. You're going to learn from the very best of the instructors from around the world. And you will get credits towards practitioner status on that course. Going through this, making sure I'm not missing any. Karen asks about sensitive feet. Well, there is a touch we call the false floor that can be really useful. The dog's lying down. You put your hand on the dog's paw, and you can just do a little circle on the with your hand on the paw. That could be really useful. You could also do some touches around the pads of the paw. That might be something worth doing. But again, it comes back to those observations. Whatever you're doing, do some observations with the dog and see how responsive the dog is. If the dog isn't comfortable with it, just stop and try something else, or stop completely. Which I've answered that one. Answered that one. Answered that one. Kirsty, yes, TTouch can be very useful post surgery with a dog. As a practitioner, I would want to be having a conversation with the client's vet as to what the surgery was, and what would be appropriate. But it would, whilst with behavioral type situations, I wouldn't be necessarily looking for vet consent. But if I was doing stuff post surgery, post surgery, then I would want to, at least be, the vet to be aware of what I'm doing. But yes, it certainly is something that can be very useful. We do have people involved in this work who are vet nurses, who are finding TTouch a really good addition to their existing toolbox. Angie says, my dog does a lot of tail chasing, then sits down and licks and grooms back legs. I'm unsure if this is stress relief and he's an anxious dog, or physically doesn't know where to focus T-touches. He likes ear slides and circular touches around the neck and muzzle, but moves away from the rear end contact. Well, what I would say, first of all, Angie, is don't worry if he doesn't like contact in his rear end. Remember, every cell of the body is linked, and Linda Tellington Jones always talks about every cell having its purpose and its function. So work where you can. If you can't get into the back end, even if you're working on the chest, that still can benefit the back end of the dog. With tail chasers, it can be a sort of obsessive behavior. I remember when I went on my first training years ago, somebody asked the instructor about that, and they said what they do is put the behavior on cue, but never actually give the dog the cue. But using body wraps could be something potentially worth trying. The zebra touch would be something I would try, just to help that dog to get a little bit more body awareness, help them learn where their body begins and ends, and where the real world begins and ends. And just sort of start somewhere. But try, if you've got your dog is tail chasing, try and distract that behavior. Don't get into the sort of situation of reinforcing it. With nervous dogs, yes, TTouch, Danny, can be really, really useful. I work a lot with, calmness is something I'm really, really interested in. And working with a nervous dog, I'd probably do the touches nice and slowly. I'd keep the sessions really short. But it's something that definitely could be really helpful. The other area, which I'm afraid we didn't cover today, but if you take the online course, it's covered in there, is using body wraps can really help with confidence, help the dog to be more optimistic. Free work would be another tool that I would really try and use with a nervous dog. And even if you have to engage with the dog a little bit when you're doing the free work, I would add free work into your work. Heather says, can you rewatch the presentation? Yes, you can. I will be putting this up on Vimeo, and I'll be emailing out tomorrow links so that you can rewatch it. I know there's a lot of content to take on board. I think it would be a good thing to watch it again. So yes, I'll be sending out links tomorrow. Let me have a look and see if there are what questions there were now in the Facebook group. Lynn Miles says, if using a Python lift for awareness of the legs or even the gait or for obedience or showing, would you evenly focus on all 4 legs or just listen to the dog and let them tell you where it's needed? Well, Lynn, you've been on one of my courses recently, and if you remember, we have that annoying expression called "it depends," and I would see really what the dog needs. For example, if I'm working with a dog that isn't putting their weight on, say, 1 of their 4 legs or 2 of their 4 legs, then I would I'd probably focus more on the legs that the dog isn't using, because if I'm going to do it on all 4 legs, it's not going to feel that much different for the legs that aren't being used. Do you remember on the course when we did the Python lifts on your arm, and I did one arm and that felt really intense, and then when we rebalanced you on the other arm, it all came back into focus. But sometimes if you've got a dog that's not using one leg properly, doing a little bit of Python lift on that dog, on that leg, getting the dog to move a little bit, you can always then rebalance the dog afterwards. But it may just be that dog just needs a little bit more awareness in that particular leg. Rowan, you ask about the McCutie harness. The McCutie is a very good harness. It is slightly different to the TTouch harness. I don't know it terribly well, but I think the idea is you thread it through the harness and sort of, you don't use the front ring, but you sort of thread the harness through, so it will be slightly different. Rachel, who's founded the McCutie business, was a TTouch practitioner many years ago, and it was based on the sort of TTouch thinking of the time, but we do things slightly differently now. So if you're getting good results with a McCutie harness, then job done, but it might be worth trying the TTouch harness and seeing if you get a different result. Kath says, which is the course would be best for an anxious or reactive dog, or also a puller, and are they accredited? These are not accredited courses. These courses are for your learning, for you to work with your dog. I would recommend the Introduction to TTouch package. You've got a mini course there on reactivity as well, but you've also there's also a whole section 4, I think it is, of course, deals with lead work, pulling on the lead, and you'll see more than just what we showed you today. You won't see the puppy stuff again because that's all new footage, but you'll see a longer version of the bingo video and some other versions. You'll learn about using the connector, which is another really useful piece of equipment, which is this piece of equipment, and that would be the course I would recommend. Tina, how long would you have access to this? Well, as long as you registered, I'll be sending you a link and you can watch. I'm not going to be putting a time scale on it to be honest. I'm just going to have a look and just check if there are any more questions in the Zoom. Kirsty, I wouldn't really say there is a particular place to start on the dog. Generally, I'll start maybe towards the sort of shoulder and work down towards the base of the tail, but sort of start somewhere. Some dogs really like working on their chest, so just sort of work where where the dog is going to, just start somewhere and see what the dog likes, see what isn't so good for the dog, and work and listen to the dog. The dog will tell you. Answered that one. I've answered that one. Cool. Well, I think that has answered any other questions. If anybody's got any last minute questions, this is your last chance before we close the session. Well, I hope this has been useful. I hope this won't be your last journey into Tellington TTouch, and we will see some of you, some of you taking the online courses, because it's a really good way to learn more and to really start to use the work with your dog. Alison says, my dog loves me using TTouch on him so much so he will stretch while I use it. That's so lovely. Yes, dogs will, my dogs will actually come and ask me for TTouch, and I think that is so lovely. It is this wonderful way of us communicating with our dogs. Bennett's question. I may have missed a question. Yes, I've answered, Jane. I've answered Heather Bennett's question. I said you can I'll be sending out tomorrow links to the to the video. I'll be putting it up in Vimeo, and I'll be sending out links tomorrow so that you'll be able to rewatch the course. Oh, there's another one in the Zoom chat. Is there? Hang on a second. I can't find this other question. If I haven't answered your question, Heather, would you like to unmute yourself and just ask me that question, because I can't find it in the chat? Sergey says, is there a better touch for a dog recovering from a twisted back? He has the okay from his osteopath. Now, to be honest, I'm not veterinary trained, and that's a little bit above my pay grade to give an answer to that without discussing it with a vet. I would sort of, maybe that's a question more for a vet physio, but it's not something I would be really comfortable or have the knowledge to answer, I'm afraid. However, I can't find this other question. So if you're still here, unmute yourself, and then I can answer the question. Dorcas says, is there a touch you would use to help brachycephalic dogs to help them with their breathing? That's a really good question. I don't know the answer to that question. All I would say is try some TTouch and see if it would help. I don't know. I'm afraid that's something I don't know the answer to, but give it a try, as long as you're not sort of restricting their breathing or doing anything that could be detrimental. Doing a bit of TTouch and see if they breathe better, but don't obviously work around the windpipe, work around the body, and see if you get see if it helps. Cool. Well, I think we're going to leave it there. Thank you all so much. It's been a pleasure. It's been a pleasure having you all here this afternoon, and I hope you are going away having learned a few new things about TTouch. Those of you who might have done TTouch before, you're going away with a little bit of a refresher, and I hope we'll see some of you on the online courses. Well, from the team here at Extra Dog and Tellington TTouch, thank you all very much, and we will see you all soon. Bye for now. Have a good rest of your day.